Well, tonight I want to talk a little bit about, I'll start talking about a perspective on the condition of the world and our culture. That'll be short. That'll be the dark part of the talk. And then I want to talk about the antidote to that, the prescription for that. Okay? So we go from dark to light, kind of. The Buddha talked about the three poisons, which are greed, ill will, and delusion, also known as the unwholesome motivations. And he talked a lot about how when those energies are in operation, they create all kinds of problems for ourselves and, unfortunately, everybody around us. Greed, ill will, and delusion. And that's why, if you think about it, the foundation of this particular path, and really any spiritual path worth its salt, instead of greed, the spiritual path cultivates the motivation for generosity. Okay? The opposite. Instead of ill will, some way of cultivating love and kindness. And instead of delusion, some way of developing a perspective that you might call a perspective that has some wisdom or some understanding in it. And especially in Buddhism, the wisdom of the understanding of the interdependence of all things. So now there's a logical, it logically follows that if there is kind of rampant greed, ill will, and delusion in an individual, that the basic unit of a culture, and if a lot of people are operating on those energies, those unskillful tendencies and motivations, they manifest directly in the institutions and systems that get developed out of that. I mean, it has to be. It's like cause and effect. Are you going to have an enlightened system that is generated and maintained by people that are, kind of working through their stuff? So you can make a case, and this could be a big discussion. We could have a great political kick around, but you could make I think you can make the case, and I want to make the case that our main institutions kind of have a life of their own, and they manifest a fair share of those three poisons. I think you can make an argument that we have institutionalized greed. It's our economic system. We have institutionalized ill will. That's this propensity toward militarism. It also manifests that institutionalization of ill will also manifests as racism. It also manifests at a really severe punitive attitude towards people who have broken the law, such that we have 600,000 people, non-violent drug offenders, in prisons. We have more people in prison per capita than any country in the history of the world, including Stalinist Russia, Maoist China. They never approached this number of people behind bars. Ill will manifests also in this kind of attitude opposed to undocumented immigrants. Of course we have to have laws, etc., but the attitude towards these people who are trying to make a life. And then there is this, and institutionalized and lawfully in some cases, that ill will towards people of certain sexual orientations. North Carolina was having a vote today. And then institutionalized delusion, which we can make a case involves large portions of the media and the educational system. the media doesn't seem to address the major question pertaining to human survival. There's lots of stuff going on in the media. So that question, in my mind, is it really possible to have economic systems set up and predicated totally on the infinite exponential expansion, that premise, that economies have to expand exponentially forever. Now, where in nature does that work out? Where have we seen it? Does it work out in the oceans? Does it work out, in the rainforests, etc.? The belief that the economies must expand forever, it flies in the face of common sense. And you might call that delusion. That could be considered delusion. All of nature works this way, and we're going to have these economies that are going to defy all of that. So far it's worked, but now there's 7 billion of us. And some of these graphs don't look so good anymore in terms of using resources. And sadly, but you don't hear much of that questioned in the media. And sadly, the educational institutions don't seem to address that question very much either. Mostly involved with training people to get involved and to help this expansion go wherever it's going. Kind of like more lemmings in line, moving along. So not only is it important to investigate our own personal greed, ill will, and delusion, but to really hold in our consciousness, some manner of working with it in the institutions that we've formed. That's, we're charged with that as good citizens, to look at that. And you can, of course, argue with anything I have to say in there, but, keeping our eye on the ball is part of our responsibility as citizens. Okay, that's the dark part. Now, the antidote and the prescription for those 3 poisons is exactly what you're learning to do. Your meditation practice. And one thing I want to say is, don't ever forget the fundamental law of nature. It's part of our practice. We talk a lot about the 3 characteristics here. But the fundamental law of nature is change. Okay. Nothing ever stays the same. Not even these seemingly powerful, self-perpetuating systems and institutions. Not even any prejudice. Not even the 3 poisons stay the same. Everything is moving and changing. So impermanence is really our friend. And in the long view, the geologic view, there's lots of possibilities. There's lots of ways to turn and navigate the ship, a little better. I remember, and I think I probably told this story once here, in Israel a couple of years ago, and being at Megiddo, which is, according to Bible prophecy, the place where Armageddon is going to happen. And there's nobody there now. It's also the place that Michener wrote the book, The Source, about. It was very interesting. There were archaeological teams from several countries and some international teams. There must have been 3, I think there were 3 teams it was a very hot summer day that were working, and they were working under tents, and they were just hanging out. So, went and chatted them up. Well, what are you doing? What are you finding? What is all this? They're working with their little toothbrushes and little brooms and stuff. And they said, well, in this particular site, we found so far, and I can't remember exactly, it was either 19 or 21 civilizations on top of one another. And it so struck me, even today when I look at, things look so challenging, and et cetera, that I bet each one of those civilizations thought, hey, we're the one. We're going to be around, But it's this impermanence thing over long spans of time, So we got that going for us. And there's also this, we also have at our personal disposal and our collective disposal, this energy that the Mahayana Buddhists call Bodhichita. Bodhi meaning awakened. And Chitta, translated in various ways, sometimes it's heart-mind, sometimes meaning thought or intention or motivation. So, bodhicitta, the awakened heart-mind. It's a nice concept. And when it's activated in a person, when it really saturates in, you just know you want to live your life in a different way. You just feel it. It's an altruistic energy. It's really the kind of upwelling of this feeling and concern for others. You want to find ways to help, to reach out. And it's inherent in us. It's not something that has to be cultivated. So sometimes this bodhicitta energy or this feeling, it's talked about on two levels. The relative level, which is basically compassion. The wanting to help. And then on the absolute level, it's the empty nature of the mind itself. And one of those of you that have studied Buddhism a little bit, one of the interesting aspects about it is the relationship that Buddhism spends a lot of time talking about between dukkha and anatta. Between dukkha meaning suffering or unsatisfactoriness, and anatta meaning the selfless nature of nature, the selflessness of this creation. And this anatta, it's a challenging concept. And people say, well, no self, not self. This claim of there not being a self, another way to look at it is that it's really a claim of not having any separation, not being alone, separate in this creation. And I've used this example before, but in New Faces I get to talk some more. Okay, you see the cloud in this? You see the cloud? No? Well, where'd the paper come from? Trees. All right? And what did the trees need? Soil, sun, some moisture. Where'd the moisture come from? Well, it came from rain. Where'd the rain come from? Probably a cloud. So now you see the cloud in this piece of paper? Of course, there it is. So it's, in a way, it's implied that this piece of paper has interbeing with the cloud. There's a real connection. And there's, of course, lots of other elements that brought this paper here. The lumberjack or the lumberjill, whoever cut down the tree. They were birthed by somebody, raised, cared for. Somebody took care of them when they were sick. They had whole groups of people all over the world making them clothes. They were educated. There were teachers that taught them some things. Somebody hopefully taught them how to use the equipment safely that they were working with, cutting down the trees. And then the equipment itself. All the people who went into the design, the generations of chainsaw development, and the factories and the fabrication and all the resources that were brought out of the ground. You get the feel, there is no separateness. This is a piece of paper, and here we are. And if we start tracing ourselves back, our parents, our grandparents, back and back, and to our ancestors, the apes, in the savannas of Africa, And then, you want to go back further from the apes, you can do that. All the way back to the point where that first cell decided somehow, miraculously, to have a wall around it and make a cell. It's our ancestor. And then you can take it back even farther. Well, what are the elements that made up that living cell? And how did they come to be? The carbon, the oxygen, whatever's in there, the calcium, etc. And then the fusion that took place in the supernova explosion which made our universe, etc. And then you go even further back to the Big Bang. And so here we are, sometimes thinking we're this separate, embattled self, but really, we're just all stardust. And everything in this room is all stardust. And we're all connected. And no one could possibly live separate or not be interdependent. It's just a physical impossibility. Indra's net is a beautiful conceptualization. Indra, I think, was an Indian god. And so the net being this three-dimensional cosmic net, and it has all these intersections, and in each intersection is a fabulous faceted jewel. And each jewel reflects all the other jewels in this net. And then when you look more deeply into the jewel, you see all the reflections from all the other jewels. And so there is this fabulous connection. Now, and the difference between samsara and nirvana, samsara meaning the wheel of suffering, where you just keep doing things that create more and more suffering in yourself, and nirvana being, or heaven and hell, if you like that terminology, or delusion and enlightenment, another way to look at it. The difference is, are you one of those little jeweled nodes that really gets it, that there is all this connection and that we're all reflecting each other? Or are you the jeweled node who oftentimes thinks, it's just me, I'm separate, And it's a struggle. And of course we're both from time to time. But practices like these are pointing us more and more to, hey, see if it's possible to directly experience that connection. There's a Tibetan teacher named Shapkar, and he says this. The mind's nature is vivid as a flawless piece of crystal, intrinsically empty, naturally radiant, and ceaselessly responsive. You see, this incredible interdependence actually points to emptiness. But not some kind of depressing, dull, vacuum, hell realm emptiness, but just empty of the separate, independent self. The mind's nature is vivid as a flawless piece of crystal, intrinsically empty, naturally radiant, and ceaselessly responsive. Okay, let's do a short reflection. We have some time. So just be comfortable in your seats. If you're on the floor, you can even lie down if you wanted to. But this will just be a couple of minutes. So, closing your eyes and take in, let's just say, 3 deep breaths. Deep, slow, long breaths. Just settling in, feeling that aliveness that's still with you. Now, as we did in the meditation, allow yourself to experience directly the boundless awareness that's here. That awareness where the sounds, sensations, emotions, thoughts, they just arise and pass within it. And they're all known by awareness. There's a cognizant faculty in this awareness. It knows. Not that it knows anything specific, but it knows. It is aware. So look directly at the nature of awareness. Awareness is empty. vast, transparent, unstained, vivid. It holds and is the knowing presence for all phenomena, but is not made of them. Look directly at the nature of awareness. It's intrinsically empty. It's radiant. It's illumined. Look directly at the nature of awareness. It's empty of self, yet ceaselessly responsive to anything that happens. It's awake, cognizant. Okay. So that simple reflection was just a pointing towards the absence of self-centeredness. Just awareness, knowing the arising and passing of phenomena. Really, in one sense, nature knowing itself. Maybe you had a few moments of experience of that, and maybe you've experienced it before. You probably all have. I'm just throwing some terminology around it. But as you know, we, of course, we're humans. We fall into self-centeredness on a pretty regular basis. It feels like kind of a gravity. All of a sudden, we have this central tight reference point that we're operating from. We're kind of shut in with all our worries, our plans, our fears, our hopes, just tight. Everything gets referenced from that narrow space. We can't help it. It just happens. We lose perspective. It narrows down. And then it's as if life becomes getting the next, life gets eliminated or reduced to getting the next desire satisfied. Whatever that might be. The next thing we want to grasp. The thing, the experience, the person. Or getting rid of the thing, the experience of the person we don't want. We're headed in one of those two directions. Life becomes that tight. I want, or I don't want. And with the delusional idea that, gee, if I can pull that off and just get this, then finally I'll be satisfied. This little centered, egocentric thing will be really satisfied, and I'll live happily and peacefully forever. We can't help it. That's what happens to us as humans a lot. But the great beauty of a practice like this is that we do get to realize the futility in that. Through our direct experience of the practice and a little studying, we start to get it. But we are humans, and so we get pulled into this gravitational field that we feel we need to gratify it, defend it, protect it, fulfill it in some way. But through a mindfulness practice, the stuff that you're endeavoring to learn and practice day to day, this patient, kind, careful attention, a patient, kind, careful investigation of phenomena as it's coming and going in your life, looking at impermanence, looking at the nature of suffering, looking at the selfless nature of all this. From that more and more subtle understanding, we do occasionally get a glimpse of this empty nature of self. And we start to feel viscerally that core teaching of the Buddha, And what he said is this: nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. He's talking about creating this solid, separate, embattled self. And he knows from his own experience, that just hurts. Feel separate, lonely, and embattled. And it hurts. Nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. So in time, you start getting little tastes of that experience. When that confining power of this kind of gravitational field, this ego gravitational field, kind of lets up. And it's almost like, for some moments, we feel like, wow, we're maybe even flying. Begin to loosen. Feel the connectedness. Experience the kind of radiance of the mind, the vastness of it. The clarity. And sometimes when you're around certain people, you just feel that. They have that experience of emptiness, and you can feel it. It's like in NASCAR, drafting behind, somebody, you get real close. And I refer, it was getting to be a few years now where Bhante Gunaratana came here and gave a talk. But part of the time he was here, he stayed at my house for a number of days. And we were just doing ordinary things. And it was kind of, his people at the monastery felt that this 80-year-old guy was too busy. He could never say no. And so it was kind of little R&R. So he'd stay at my place. So I had this little fabulous world treasure monk in my house for a couple of days. And we would just be doing regular things. I'd be making him some food, and we'd go for these long walks with the dogs, and he was very interested in the dogs and the birds. And we had some Dharma discussions, but it was mostly just, hey, he'd get up and he'd meditate for 3 hours in the morning from 3 to 6. And then he would be working on 4 books at once on his laptop. And with a giggle, he'd say, I'm never going to finish these. I'm going to die, but somebody might pick them up. Might be useful to somebody. But I started noticing after about, a period of time, I was starting to feel like I was stoned. Just being around this guy. And what was that? I was feeling this kind of spacious emptiness of self. It was just all kind of open, and there was this kind of flow going on. I was like, what is this? Am I coming down with something? It was really beautiful and inspiring. So we can begin to feel that emptiness just being around certain people like that are open. Mother Teresa, another great example. She was asked, what do you say to God when you pray? And she says, I don't say anything, I just listen. And then the interviewer, good interviewer, says, well, what does God say to you? If you're listening, what does he say to you? And she says, he doesn't say anything either. He just listens. And then she said, if you don't understand that, I can't explain it to you. So this little spit of a woman, it's just sitting there kind of listening to the listening to the listening. Well, she's just resting in emptiness, with God kind of reverberating in this huge space. Beautiful. And from the Buddha, in what is seen, there should be just the seen. In what is heard, there should be just the heard. In what is sensed, there should be just the sense. In what is thought, there should be just the thought. Yeah, just that. Awareness, knowing, activity. Without a whole bunch of constructs laid over it. Very open and empty, but in a full way. And Rumi says this: live in the nowhere that you come from, even though you have an address here. Live in the nowhere that you come from, even though you have an address here. That's a rich, beautiful paradox of this practice. One of the many paradoxes. To come to know the nowhere, which is kind of the everywhere, even while we've got our boots on the ground, right here, right now. We're in the middle of all our activities, relationships, joys, sorrows, gains, losses, responsibilities, the whole Meshuggah thing. So when we get this taste of interdependence, this taste of the interbeing of all creation, this intrinsic emptiness of self, just some taste of that, what happens is that compassion arises spontaneously. It has to. You know, we're all hooked in this together. The heart naturally wants to open, wants to help. At the retreat I was just teaching, somebody asked me, well, is empathy and compassion the same thing? Well, no. Compassion is it's like a step further. Empathy is great in its own right. I mean, that's a feeling for another's difficulty. But compassion, when the heart starts quivering with compassion, it wants to do something. It wants to help alleviate the suffering. It's active. Thich Nhat Hanh always would say, oh, compassion, it's a verb. It's not a noun. It's a verb. There's activity. There's a wanting to help. This is from Norman Fisher, the Zen teacher. He says, we've got all sorts of needs and we can pile them up. When self-concern is our major motivation, it requires a high level of cooperation from the world, and it just doesn't work like that. When the light of Bodhichita goes off, the whole perspective changes, broadens. We see how much happier it is to be expansive and to be concerned for others. And when we look into the nature of self, we see that we are the other. Under self-concern, when bad things happen, there's a tight anguish. The picture widens out, and we have a whole different set of concerns. And even when Bodhichita sees suffering, when it sees suffering in the world and takes it in, there is still room for joy. There's sorrow, but because of the expansive perspective, there is room for joy. It's not narrow. It's like what I was trying to point at in that little reflection we did. I mean, awareness can hold everything. You can be grieving a loss, and there can still be room for joy and humor. You know, if we become aware of the vastness of awareness, it can really hold everything and give us spaciousness and allowing life to play. And of course, we do get identified and lost and just, from time to time. But there's a possibility. And this from the Dalai Lama. Now, here's somebody. How many years in exile? What did he leave in 59 or 61 or something like that? So that's, 50 years or something? And he's been trying all that time for human rights for his people. And how much success has he had? About zero, Maybe a little something here and there. I mean, however you look at it. And what's amazing is that he has not become bitter. His heart remains open, even to those who he's trying to influence. It's just absolutely remarkable. His heart has become legendary. And he says this: whenever I meet people, I always approach them from the standpoint of the most basic things we have in common. We each have a physical structure, a mind, emotions. We're all born in the same way and we all die. All of us want happiness and do not want to suffer. Looking at others from this standpoint, rather than emphasizing secondary differences, such as the fact that I am a Tibetan, or of a different color, religion, or cultural background, allows me to have a feeling that I'm meeting someone just the same as me. I find that relating to others on that level makes it much easier to exchange and communicate with each other. Many high-profile examples of bodhicitta. Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and we can go on and on. But it also takes many ordinary and beautiful forms. Even from regular, fearful, wounded people who are touched by this energy of bodhicitta and reach out and act. You don't have to be some international superstar. It's a few minutes left, and I think I'll finish. I want to tell the story about my father. Here was a guy, and I mentioned him here before. Son of an immigrant from Ireland, who married, we believe, a Mohawk from New York State. They had a bunch of children. 5 of them died in infancy. 7 of them made it through adulthood. None of the kids had an education past like the 4th grade. His father died when he was 2. They all had to work. So he goes in the war. World War II happens. He's in the war. 670 straight days of combat with the Fifth Army in the invasion of Africa and the invasion of Italy, fighting his way up through there. Comes out of the war, and he has full-blown PTSD. They didn't call it that then, but he was one of maybe millions of people who had this. So he had a violent temper. He was impatient. If you woke him up, if you touched him, whatever part of the body you touched, he would swing with a closed fist in that direction. My mother really learned to duck and cover, And my sister and I also learned how to do this appropriately. So anyway, grew up in New Jersey. We lived in a row house, and there was like 900 square feet, and all these. It was a lot of fun. A lot of kids in this row house. We were on the corner row house. We had this little postage stamp size yard, but next to us was the oldest child was the leader of the North Jersey Aliens motorcycle gang, Jersey Jack, a legend in his own time. Newspapers would interview him, like when Easy Rider came out, the movie. They interviewed Jersey Jack. He'd been in and out of prison. I got along with him. He was kind of a friend. But I didn't really hang out with him, but he would buy me beer and my buddies beer and liquor and stuff. And it was cachet for me to know this guy. Oh, Pat, he knows this guy. So I got some space. So their motorcycle gang, their clubhouse in Patterson had been closed down. Some of them had been arrested. And so they would start having motorcycle meetings right next to our house. So I'm there. I'm probably 14 or 15. And all of a sudden my father comes roaring by me, and he's cursing up a storm. Those SOBs. And he roars outside, and I'm going, what's going on? Well, there's about 15 or 20 motorcycles out there, and all these guys and some of their female compatriots, and they're hanging out, and they're drinking beer, and they're working on their bikes. And a couple of them are relieving themselves on our fence. So he just charges right out there in the middle of it, and I'm going, and I don't have a good relationship with him. And I'm thinking, I'm frozen in fear. Do I need to die for him right now? And so I grab a baseball bat, and I'm standing, and I have the door open, and the bat is inside, and the door's open, and I'm just watching, and I'm just frozen in fear. I'm surprised I didn't wet my pants. And he's out there, and he's railing at him, and these guys are moving close to him. And then Jack kind of cuts through the crowd, quiets him down, apologizes to my father, And these other guys apologize to him while looking down on him, with their biceps just kind of pulsing, looking down on him. And so he comes back in the house, and I'm just like, dodged a bullet. Not more than 5 minutes later, I hear this rumbling, and up from the basement, I see him, and he's dragging his toolboxes. And I say, well, what are you doing? And he's going outside, and he says, I'm going to help these kids with their bikes. And it's like, where did that come from? It's in there. And despite all his wounding, all his lifetime of struggle and scar, there was still that urge to help. And it came out. And his tools were precious. Don't mess with his tools. I have one of his toolboxes now. He's gone. But it says, keep the hell out. You open it, and then it's painted, keep the hell out. But there he is, and he's handing out tools, and he's working, and he's helping them with their carburetors and everything. So it's there in all of us, bodhicitta. It's not anything special. And we don't have to design it from the ground up. We just have to kind of look for it. And if we can take a pause, just that sacred pause like when we're meditating, and if we can relax, we can find that loving heart. It's there. We can find that kindness. It's there all the time. So that's bodhicitta. Have a good evening.